What's up guys, it's Marius from Audio Judgment and today we have a sponsored video, which means I'm getting some free stuff. I quite like free stuff, but besides the fact that I get to play with new gear, if you are interested in this product, you get to know what I like and what I don't like about it. Let's go! Arylic has reached out to me and asked if I can make a video about one of their products. Okay, problem is I never used one of their products before. To be honest, I have noticed their DIY amps when I was building Bluetooth speakers and was browsing for mini amplifiers. The thing that made me overlook them was the fact that they had too many features and I didn't want to pay extra for functions which I won't use. Taking a quick look through their product line, I see that they focus on wireless amplifiers. Basically, you control them using an app on your phone, and you can do all sorts of stuff like stream from most of the available music apps on the market, and even more complex stuff like multi-room music reproduction. Now, I'm more of a DIY guy, so I chose the 2.1 amplifier board and I plan to build a 2.1 home boombox. If you are interested in that, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This video will focus on the amp and the future video will focus on the boombox which will use this amp. So let's begin by opening the package. It's just a plain cardboard box with a sticker on it. In my opinion, this is a plus as it keeps the costs down. Furthermore, you are buying an item for DIY, so the fact that you are getting a box should already exceed your expectations. Inside you find the amp in an anti-static bag, a tiny manual with instructions regarding how to use the product, 3 nuts and washers which will go on the volume knobs if you wish to panel mount the amp, and a tiny little screwdriver used to tighten the connections which will go to the speakers. Important thing to mention is that the amp doesn't come with a power supply. You have to buy it separately, and since we mentioned the optional stuff sold separately, there's a whole bunch of them. You got a remote, an acrylic case if you want to use it as a desktop amp, you got a variety of expansion boards to increase the functionality, external antennas, even an optional software package. We will cover this up in a minute, but let's focus our attention to the power supply. If you don't have a spare power supply at home, you need to buy one, and they offer one as well. However, there is something I want to mention. If you look at the specs of the amp, you will get these numbers. So, if the connected speakers have the right impedance, the potential power rating is a combined 200 watts on all channels. Obviously, if you want to squeeze that much power out of this amp, you will need a power supply with at least 200 watts. The power brick they offer is a 24 volt 4.16 amp. And if you multiply those numbers, the result rounds up to 100 watts. If you intend to use the amp on high impedance drivers, there is no need to spend more on a power supply. But bear in mind, if you want to achieve the maximum power capabilities of this amp, you will need a 24 volt 9.2 amp power brick, which can get pretty expensive. Now let's analyze the board. We got a whole lot going on in the front, in the back, and on the top as well. Just look at the I/O on the back of the board. You got Ethernet, USB, audio jack. You are basically an HDMI connector away from a Raspberry Pi. But let's start with the front. You got 3 knobs: volume, bass, and tone. And don't think you can just turn them. You can also press them and long press them for 5 seconds to access other functions. You can infinitely turn them. This is because you can change these settings from the remote and app as well. Oh, and by the way, when you turn the knobs, if you have speakers connected to the amp, it has an audible feedback. I don't know about you, but I find it annoying. If you press the volume knob, you cycle through the sources: Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, aux-in, and USB. The selected source is confirmed by one of these LEDs lighting up. If you short press the tone or bass knobs, you reset the value of that setting. So if you don't know what the bass setting is, let's say is +5, you simply press the knob and it resets the setting to 0. I don't fiddle with such settings, so what I like to do is set the knobs to 12 o'clock and press them once to reset it to 0. And now my OCD is pleased. The tone and bass dials you can also long press. If you do so, the tone dial will increase the crossover frequency by 10, and the bass dial will decrease the bass frequency by 10 Hz. If I'm not mistaken, the default crossover frequency is 110 Hz, and you can play around it through the 80 to 200 Hz range. What is awesome about this crossover is that it's an actual crossover. Some cheaper amps only use a low-pass filter for the subwoofer and give full range signal to the other channels. So the 2.0 speakers will get signal with filtered bass. And now I hear you ask, what if I don't have a sub yet and I want to play full range signal on my 2.0 system? Well, you actually can do that, but you need to buy the optional software package. What is left of the front side is this infrared sensor. If you are buying the optional remote, you are going to aim it at this thing. If you are hiding this amp inside the speaker box, then you can buy an optional IR extender and you can place the sensor wherever you see fit. Now, if we move on to the back, I'll explain each of the connections and leave that little button over there for last because I want to rant a bit about it. So here you connect the power. You can also use these two terminals, which are very close by. Any charger between 12 volts and 24 volts will do, but I highly recommend using a 24 volt one. And try to find one with a high amp rating. Next, we find the Ethernet port, and basically you connect this to your router. It's the same thing as connecting to Wi-Fi, and we will discuss that when we open up the app. Next, we have a full-size USB port. I tried hooking up a USB thumb drive with some MP3s on it, and it works fine. Also, I tried to charge my phone using that port, and it also works fine. Next, we have the micro USB port, and I use this to hook up to my computer. When you do that, you realize that this is basically an external sound card with a built-in amplifier. The computer sees it as a sound card, and any audio running on your computer will play through it. Also, you can use the optional software when you hook it up to your computer. Next, we have the aux-in, and here you can connect any sound source using a stereo jack plug. And finally, we get to the button. This button is mainly an on-off button. If you long press it, you terminate your wireless connection depending on which source you are on, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Nothing wrong with that, but here's my issue. So I got the amp over here, and you got the 3 knobs in the front, which you want to have access to, because this is the one you press and change the source, you have the volume. So these are made to be panel mounted. And let's say you panel mount this amp. So basically you have these 3 knobs to the exterior and you have access to them. Problem is, now you have the on-off button on the back of the board and you cannot reach it. A solution to this is you should place it in the front and make it so you can panel mount it as well. However, there is a solution to this, as I have spoken to the tech team, and you can basically solder a momentary switch to the connections on the button. and then you can panel mount it to the front. To express my opinion even further, here is how I would have done it. So this is a DIY board. Most likely you are going to place this inside a box, a speaker box, whatever. So I would get rid of all of these knobs and the on-off button and make a front panel which you can mount on the front of your box, which will connect to one of these headers on the board, and you have all of the connections that you need: the volume, the source select, the on-off button, everything. And that solves the problem. However, this is not completely fair because they do have such extension board. My issue is that this is exactly what it says, a button board. This is not the front panel. These are PCB buttons. These are PCB LEDs. You can even see the solder points for the headers on the back. A front panel is something that needs to look good and feel nice to use. Maybe they will create this extension board in the future. Now let's move on to the software. We have two, the mobile app and the one you install on your computer to do advanced settings. Let's start with the one on the computer. This app may or may not be useful. First, you have some really advanced stuff on the first page. Most of it, I don't even know what it means. You can fiddle with some settings regarding the digital to analog converter and in general stuff that you don't want to mess with. Either I'm ignorant or it's just pointless stuff around here. Second page is the one which has some interesting settings. Here you can set up a 10-band parametric EQ, which will apply to the whole system. Then you have some effects that probably no one will use. Next, we can set up the crossover points for each channel and also a 10-band parametric EQ for each individual channel. This option is very useful. Then we can set up the volume gains depending on your sound source. Nice. And lastly, we can set up the output to be stereo or mono if you so desire. In my opinion, the app is not worth the money. I don't plan to use any EQ, and for the crossover point you can change it using the buttons on the front. If you want to use the EQ or turn off the crossover completely, this app is for you. Otherwise, don't bother with it. Regarding the phone app, that one works fine. And I'm gonna try to show you in real time how this works. So I selected the source to Wi-Fi and open up the app. Now I already set this up, so basically you connect to the Wi-Fi of the board, then you can access your router, enter the password of your wireless, and that should be it. So here you have the menu, and I'm going to show you the settings first. Not over here. So here you have the settings. You can change the treble or the bass, which you can do from the front as well. And you can also change the sound source. So you have line in, you have Bluetooth, and optical I see over here. And here you can play the music from your phone. Unfortunately, I don't have any music stored on my phone. You can also use internet radio, and it has like every radio around the world. And then you have all of these apps, all of these streaming apps. So Pandora, Deezer, Spotify, Tidal, Napster, so on. Now the problem with these, I cannot show you how this works, because if I open Spotify, you need a premium subscription. So I'm using the free app on Spotify. I use it to listen to podcasts from time to time, so I don't pay for it. But if you plan to use streaming apps, remember that you need a subscription for it to work. And the app works pretty fine in my opinion. Now let's get to the amp sound quality. This might seem the area to focus the most on, but seriously, I'm not going to judge it too much. It's a mini amplifier board. You don't ask much of it. The power capabilities are also dependent on the power supply you attach to it. I just hooked up two 30-watt 8-ohm speakers and a 75-watt 4-ohm subwoofer. With the 4 amp power brick they supplied, the speakers move with no issue. I think it does the job well. However, there is something which I can objectively criticize. Does it have any background noise? Because Bluetooth devices are notoriously known for ground loop issues. And I can sadly confirm that this device does have some background clicking noise. To be fair, it's only present when there is no music playing and you can barely hear it. Here are some sound comparisons to show you what I mean. Now to give you a conclusion, I think this will work great in my 2.1 boombox project. It will need some extra effort to place the correct buttons and LEDs on the front panel, but in the end I think this amp will be a great choice. And that's a wrap for this video. Make sure to subscribe to not miss the DIY boombox video, and I'll see you next time. Peace!